I was standing in that hospital room when she pulled off the prosthetic mask, and my whole world, everything I thought I knew, everything I'd sacrificed, every lie I told myself to sleep at night, it all shattered like glass hitting concrete. The woman I married wasn't dying. She wasn't even old. And the look in her eyes when she peeled away that latex skin, when her real face emerged from underneath all those wrinkles and age spots I'd been staring at for 8 months. That look told me I'd been playing checkers while she'd been playing chess this whole time. Before I tell you how I ended up married to a stranger wearing someone else's face, do me a favor. If you've ever made a choice you knew was wrong, but did it anyway because you thought you had no other option, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what part of the world you're watching from. Because this story, this confession, it's not just mine. It's for everyone who's ever been so desperate they stop recognizing themselves in the mirror. Subscribe if you want to know how deep this rabbit hole goes, because trust me, you haven't heard anything yet. My name is Jericho Stone. I'm 35 years old now, but I was 34 when this all went down. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in a neighborhood where corner stores had bulletproof glass and dreams went to die before they turned 18. By the time I hit 34, I thought I'd made it out. I had a decent job at an insurance company, a small apartment in Atlanta where I'd moved for work, and I was sending money home every month to help my mama and my 2 younger sisters. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't poor no more either. I was that dangerous kind of comfortable enough to think I was safe, but broke enough that one phone call could pull me right back into that hole I'd been climbing out of my whole life. That phone call came on a Tuesday morning in March. Mama's voice on the other end, shaking like leaves in a storm, telling me the doctors found something in her lungs. Stage 3. Aggressive. The treatment would cost more than I'd make in 3 years, and that's if insurance covered half of it. I remember sitting in my car in that office parking lot, staring at the steering wheel, doing math in my head that wouldn't add up no matter how many times I rearranged the numbers. That's when the devil started whispering. That's when I started thinking about shortcuts. That's when I met Vivian Ashford. Or at least, that's when I met the woman wearing Vivian Ashford's face. The community center on Peachtree Street had these big windows that let in too much light, the kind that made everything look overexposed, like an old photograph bleached by time. I'd never been to a charity fundraiser before, wasn't really my scene. But my coworker Shanice had dragged me there, saying I needed to network with people who have money. She meant well. She didn't know I was drowning. Nobody knew except me and the credit card companies blowing up my phone every morning. I stood near the refreshment table, wearing a suit I'd bought at a thrift store, trying to look like I belonged among these people, with their easy laughs and expensive watches. That's where I first saw her, Vivian. Or the woman I thought was Vivian. She was sitting in a wheelchair near the back, attended by a younger woman in scrubs who I assumed was her nurse. She looked ancient, had to be pushing 80, maybe older. Her skin hung loose on her bones like clothes on a scarecrow, covered in liver spots and papery wrinkles that caught the harsh light. Her hands trembled on the armrests of her wheelchair, spotted and gnarled with arthritis. But her eyes, those eyes were sharp as broken glass, watching everything, calculating. When those eyes landed on me across that room, something shifted in the air. She gestured to her nurse, whispered something, and suddenly the nurse was walking toward me with a purpose that made my stomach drop. "Excuse me," the nurse said, her voice professional but not unkind. Her name tag read Philippa. "Mrs. Ashford would like to speak with you." I looked around, thinking she had the wrong guy, but she was staring right at me. "She doesn't usually take interest in people at these events. You should feel honored." The way she said it made it sound like a warning and an invitation at the same time. I followed her back across that room, feeling eyes on us, feeling like I was walking towards something I couldn't take back. Vivian's wheelchair sat in a corner where the light didn't quite reach, creating shadows that made her face look even more skeletal. Up close, she smelled like expensive perfume trying to cover something medicinal underneath. "You're not like the others here," Vivian said, her voice cracking and thin, but with an authority that made me stand straighter without meaning to. You're wearing a suit that doesn't fit right. Your shoes are good but old. You've been checking your phone every 5 minutes like you're expecting bad news. You're here because someone made you come, but your mind is somewhere else, somewhere that's costing you money you don't have. I felt naked, like she'd reached into my skull and pulled out my thoughts. I'm not sure what you mean, ma'am, I stammered, but she raised one trembling hand to stop me. Don't lie to someone who's running out of time. I can smell desperation. I've worn it myself. Sit down. There was a chair next to her, and I sat, even though every instinct told me to run. I'm dying, she said matter-of-factly, like she was commenting on the weather. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, and no one to leave it to. My husband died 15 years ago. We never had children. My siblings and their vulture offspring are waiting for me to die so they can fight over my estate like dogs over a bone. I won't give them the satisfaction. She paused, her breathing labored, her chest rising and falling with effort. I've watched you for 20 minutes. You're a good man trying to hold something together. You have that look, the one that says you do anything for the people you love. That kind of loyalty is rare. It's also dangerous. It makes people do things they never thought they would. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I couldn't look away. So here's my proposal, Jericho Stone. Yes, I know your name. I had Philippa find out while you were standing at that table looking lost. Marry me. Give me 6 months of companionship. Make my siblings think I've lost my mind. And when I die, you inherit everything. $32 million. 3 properties, investment portfolios that will keep you and your family comfortable for generations. All you have to do is pretend to love a dying old woman and let me die with dignity instead of alone. The room tilted. 32 million. I could save Mama. I could give my sisters the education I never had. I could stop waking up at 3 in the morning calculating bills, but something about this felt wrong. Felt like a trap wrapped in salvation. Why me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why not someone from your world? Vivian smiled then, and it was the saddest smile I'd ever seen, making her face fold into even deeper creases. Because someone from my world would see this as an opportunity. You see it as a sin. That's exactly why you're the only one I trust with this. You'll hate yourself for saying yes, which means you'll treat me like a human being instead of a bank account with a heartbeat. She reached out with that shaking hand and placed something in my palm, a business card with a lawyer's name and number. Think about it tonight. Call me tomorrow. But Jericho, understand this. If you say yes, you commit fully. No backing out. No second thoughts. You become my husband in every public way that matters. And if you betray me or try to take advantage beyond our agreement. Her grip tightened with surprising strength. I'll make sure you lose everything, including that mama you're so desperate to save. I left that fundraiser in a daze, that card burning in my pocket like a hot coal. I drove around Atlanta for 3 hours, not really seeing the streets, just driving, thinking, praying to a God I hadn't talked to since I was a kid in Sunday school. I thought about Mama, about the way she used to work 3 jobs just to keep food on our table, about how she never complained, never asked for help, just kept moving forward like a soldier in a war nobody else could see. I thought about my sisters, Keisha and Tamra, both so smart, both with so much potential, both stuck in Baton Rouge working retail jobs when they should have been in college. And I thought about the man my father was before he left, a man who chose himself over us. I'd sworn I'd never be like him. I'd sworn I'd sacrifice anything for family. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off, staring at my phone at Mama's contact photo, her smiling at a church picnic 3 years ago, before the cancer, before everything got heavy. I could hear her voice in my head. Baby, you can't save everyone. Sometimes you gotta save yourself first. But I'd never believed that. I'd always put them first. And this was the biggest first I could give them. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the card. A man answered, crisp and professional. Whitmore and Associates. I took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. My name is Jericho Stone. I'm calling about Vivian Ashford's proposal. Tell her I'm in. There was a pause, then the sound of paper shuffling. She said you'd call tonight. She wants you to know that the contract will be ready tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Her estate in Buckhead. Don't be late, Mr. Stone. Mrs. Ashford values punctuality above all else. The line went dead, and I sat there in the dark, wondering if I'd just sold my soul or saved my family. Maybe, I thought, maybe those two things were the same. The Ashford estate sat behind iron gates that looked like they belonged in a movie about old Southern money. I pulled up in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, the engine making that clicking sound that meant I'd need another repair I couldn't afford soon, and felt the weight of the place pressing down on me before I'd even stepped out of the car. The house was a 3-story Georgian mansion, all white columns and brick facade, with gardens that probably cost more to maintain monthly than I made in a year. A security guard at the gate checked my ID, made a phone call, then waved me through with an expression that said he'd seen people like me come and go, always with that same desperate look in their eyes. Philippa met me at the front door. In daylight, she looked younger than I thought, maybe late 40s, with kind eyes that had seen too much. Mr. Stone, right on time? Mrs. Ashford appreciates that. She led me through a foyer with marble floors that echoed with each step, past paintings that probably belonged in museums, through hallways lined with photographs of people who looked like they'd never known struggle. We stopped at a library, actual floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, a fireplace that could fit a person inside it. Vivienne sat in her wheelchair by a window overlooking the gardens, looking even smaller and frailer in this grand room. Next to her stood a man in an expensive suit, gray hair slicked back, with a briefcase that screamed lawyer. Jericho, Vivienne said, not turning from the window. This is Charles Whitmore. He's drawn up our prenuptial agreement and marriage contract. Sit, read, ask questions, but understand, these terms are not negotiable. I sat across from the lawyer, and he slid a thick stack of papers toward me. As I read, my stomach twisted tighter with each page. The terms were specific, almost surgical in their precision. We would marry within 2 weeks in a private ceremony. I would move into the estate immediately. I would accompany her to medical appointments, social functions, and family gatherings. I would play the role of devoted husband convincingly. In public, I could show affection, holding hands, gentle touches, nothing more. In private, I had my own wing of the house. She had hers. We were business partners, not lovers. I could continue working, but I had to be available when she needed me. The marriage would last until her death, which doctors estimated at 4 to 7 months. Upon her death, assuming I'd fulfilled all contractual obligations and hadn't violated any terms, I would inherit $32 million, the estate, and various properties and investments. But here's where it got sharp. If I violated the agreement, if I tried to access funds beyond what she allocated monthly, if I brought other women to the estate, if I spoke to media, if I treated her with anything less than respect, if I conspired with her family against her, if I attempted to hasten her death in any way, the contract was void. I'd receive nothing. Worse, she had documented evidence of our arrangement that would be released, destroying any reputation I had. This isn't a marriage, I said, looking up at her. This is insurance. Vivienne finally turned from the window, and in the morning light, she looked more like a corpse than a person, the skin on her face so thin I could see veins underneath. This is clarity, Jericho. Marriage without clarity is where people get hurt. You mentioned family gatherings, I said, flipping back through the pages. Your family, they're going to hate this, hate me. Vivienne's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. They already hate you, and they haven't even met you yet. My nephew Cunningham has been managing my affairs for 3 years, thinking he's next in line. My niece Beatrice has been visiting every Sunday with her children, putting on performances of concern that would make Broadway jealous. My sister Lorraine hasn't spoken to me in 12 years, but suddenly she's very interested in my health. They're wolves, Jericho, and I'm about to throw you into their den. She gestured to Philippa, who handed me a folder with photographs. Study these faces, learn their names, know your enemies, because they will try to destroy this marriage and destroy you to get what they think is theirs. I looked at the photos, well-dressed white people with practiced smiles and cold eyes. Cunningham Ashford, 47, investment banker, married with 2 kids in private schools. Beatrice Langford, 52, married to a real estate developer, 3 grown children. Lorraine Ashford, 74, Vivian's older sister, living in a penthouse in Midtown. There were others, cousins, second cousins, business associates, all of them circling, waiting. What happens at the first family gathering? I asked. When they see you married to a young black man from Baton Rouge? Vivian's eyes glinted with something that might have been joy or might have been cruelty. That's when the real fun begins. That's when they'll show you exactly who they are. And Jericho, you need to be ready. They'll try to buy you off. They'll investigate you. They'll threaten you. You have to stand firm, no matter what they offer or what they threaten to take away. Charles Whitmore cleared his throat, pulling my attention back to the contract. There's one more provision you need to understand, Mr. Stone. On page 47. I flipped to it, scanning the legal language until I found the clause that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Ashford retains the right to test the authenticity of Mr. Stone's commitment through means of her choosing, at times of her discretion, including but not limited to financial temptation, emotional manipulation, stage scenarios, and character evaluation by third parties. Should Mr. Stone fail these tests, the contract may be voided at Mrs. Ashford's sole discretion. You're going to test me, I said slowly. You're going to set traps. Vivian leaned forward slightly, the wheelchair creaking. I'm going to make sure you're who you say you are. Because if you're not, if you're just another person trying to take advantage of a dying woman, I'd rather know now than leave you my life's work. I looked at the contract, at the pen sitting next to it, at this strange dying woman who was offering me everything and nothing at the same time. I thought about Mama in that hospital bed, about the treatment she couldn't afford, about the medical bills stacking up like a prison being built around her. I thought about Keisha, 22, working at Target when she should be studying engineering. I thought about Tamra, 19, who'd just gotten accepted to Spelman, but couldn't go because we had no way to pay for it. I thought about all the times I told them it'll be okay when I knew it wouldn't be. I picked up the pen. Where do I sign? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Vivian nodded to Whitmore, who showed me where to initial, where to sign, page after page after page. When it was done, when I'd signed away the next 6 months of my life to play husband to a dying stranger, Vivian reached out and took my hand with those trembling, spotted fingers. Welcome to the family, Jericho, she said. God help you. And I swear, the way she said it, it sounded less like a greeting and more like a warning about what was coming, about the storm I just walked into with my eyes wide open and my hands tied. Philippa handed me a key card. Your wing is ready. You can move in this weekend. Mrs. Ashford would like you to join her for dinner tonight at 7. Dress code is business casual. As I left that library, I passed a portrait in the hallway, a younger Vivian, maybe 50 years ago, standing next to a distinguished man in military uniform. Her face in the painting was beautiful, unlined, full of life, and something like hope. I looked back at the woman in the wheelchair, at what time and sickness had done to her, and I wondered, if I live long enough, will life hollow me out like that too? Will someone look at me one day and see nothing but a shell where a person used to be? Moving into the Ashford estate felt like stepping into someone else's life and wearing it like an ill-fitting costume. I packed everything I owned, which wasn't much, just clothes and a few books and pictures of my family, into 2 suitcases and a backpack, and drove through those iron gates on Saturday morning with the strange feeling that I was leaving Jericho Stone behind and becoming someone new, someone I didn't quite recognize yet. My wing of the house was bigger than any apartment I'd ever lived in. Bedroom with a king-size bed, sitting room, private bathroom with a tub deep enough to drown in, walk-in closet, and a small kitchen area. Everything was decorated in muted blues and grays, tasteful and expensive and completely impersonal, like a hotel room for someone rich. Philippa gave me a tour, showing me which parts of the house were mine and which belonged to Vivian. She sleeps poorly, Philippa explained as we walked through the main house. The pain is worse at night. Sometimes she calls out. Don't be alarmed if you hear her. The medical staff handles everything. You're not expected to be a caregiver, just a presence, someone who makes her feel less alone. We stopped at the kitchen, massive and gleaming with appliances I didn't know how to use. A woman in her 50s with warm brown skin and flour on her hands looked up from where she was preparing something that smelled like heaven. "This is Dilly the cook," Philippa said. "Delia, this is Mr. Stone, Mrs. Ashford's new husband." The word husband felt foreign in my mouth, like speaking a language I'd never studied. Delia looked me up and down with the kind of frank assessment that reminded me of my grandmother, seeing everything, judging fairly, making decisions about character in seconds. "So you're the one," she said finally, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mrs. Ashford's been talking about you all week. Says you're different from what she expected." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just nodded. "I grew up eating my mama's cooking," I said. "Whatever you make, I'm sure it'll be amazing." Something in Delia's face softened. "Your mama taught you manners, at least. That's more than most of the folks who come through here. Dinner's at 7. Don't be late. She hates lateness more than she hates being sick." As Philippa led me away, I heard Delia muttering something in Spanish, something that sounded like a prayer or maybe a warning. I spent the afternoon unpacking and trying to process the surreal turn my life had taken. At 6:30, I showered and dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt, checking myself in the mirror and seeing a man who looked like he was about to attend a job interview he wasn't qualified for. I made my way to the dining room at 6:55, finding it set like something from a movie. Candles, fine china, crystal glasses catching the light from a chandelier that probably cost more than my Honda. Vivienne was already seated at the head of the table, wearing a deep purple dress that hung off her skeletal frame. Someone, probably Philippa, had done her makeup, trying to give color to the gray pallor of her skin. It made her look more like a doll than a person, uncanny and unsettling. "You clean up well," Vivienne said as I took my seat at the other end of the long table, a distance of about 10 feet between us that felt like a canyon. "How does it feel, living in a palace?" I could have lied, could have said it was great, but something about the way she looked at me made me think she'd know. "Honestly, it feels like I'm trespassing, like someone's going to realize I don't belong here and kick me out." She laughed, a harsh crackling sound that turned into a coughing fit. Philippa appeared from nowhere with water and medicine. When Vivienne recovered, she waved Philippa away and fixed those sharp eyes back on me. "Good. The day you feel comfortable here is the day you've lost yourself. Never forget you're a guest in this life, Jericho. All of us are. Some of us just have nicer rooms while we're visiting." Delia brought out the first course, some kind of soup with herbs floating on top, and I realized I had no idea which spoon to use. There were 3 of them. Vivienne watched me hesitate, then picked up the outer one, a small gesture but clear instruction. I followed her lead. "Tell me about your mother," she said after a few sips. "The real story, not the sanitized version." So I told her about Mama working overnight shifts at a nursing home, coming home at dawn to make us breakfast before school, sleeping for 3 hours, then getting up to take us to church on Wednesday nights. About how she never bought herself new clothes, but made sure we always had school supplies. About how when Daddy left, she didn't cry in front of us, saved all her breaking for when she thought we were asleep, but I could hear her through the walls, sobbing into her pillow like the world was ending. About how she taught us that being poor didn't mean being less, that dignity didn't cost money, that love was the only currency that mattered. "And now she's dying," Vivienne said bluntly, "and you're here playing pretend with a woman you don't know to save her." I set down my spoon. "Yes," she nodded slowly. "At least you're honest about it. Most people would dress it up, make it sound noble. But here's what I need you to understand, Jericho. Your mother sounds like a woman of faith and principle. Have you told her about our arrangement?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. "No," I admitted. "I told her I got a promotion, a big raise, that I could afford her treatment now. I didn't tell her I got married, and I didn't tell her how." Vivienne leaned back in her chair, and for a moment she looked almost satisfied, like I'd confirmed something she suspected. "So our first act as husband and wife is a lie. Not to me, but to the person you're doing this for. How does that sit in your stomach? It sat like poison, actually. The truth was, I'd called Mama 3 days ago and spun the most elaborate lie of my life, talking about a promotion I didn't get, about how the company was expanding my role, about how they were giving me a signing bonus that would cover her treatment. She'd cried tears of joy on the phone, thanked Jesus, told me she always knew I was special. And I'd sat there in my old apartment saying, "I love you, Mama," while knowing I just made a deal with the devil in designer clothes. It sits heavy, I told Vivian. Every day I don't tell her the truth, it gets heavier. She studied me across that canyon of table. Good. Hold on to that weight. The moment it feels light is the moment you've become someone your mother wouldn't recognize. Delia brought out the main course. Chicken with some kind of fancy sauce, vegetables arranged like art, and we ate in silence for a while. Then Vivian spoke again, her voice quieter now, tired. My husband Richard was a good man. We married for love back when I believed in such things. 52 years we were together. He died in this house, in the bedroom upstairs, with me holding his hand. You know what his last words were? I shook my head. He said, "I'm sorry I'm leaving you alone." Not, "I love you." Not, "Thank you for the life we built." Just sorry for leaving me alone with all this. She gestured vaguely at the house around us. That's when I learned that love doesn't protect you from loneliness. Sometimes it makes loneliness sharper because you know exactly what you're missing. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She smiled that sad smile again. "Because I want you to know that I understand loneliness. I understand making choices out of desperation. And I understand that what we're doing, you and I, it's a transaction, yes, but it doesn't have to be cruel. We can be honest with each other, even if we're lying to everyone else. That honesty, that might be the only real thing either of us has for the next 6 months." Something shifted in the room then, something I couldn't quite name. For a moment, Vivian wasn't a contract or a means to an end. She was just a dying woman who didn't want to die alone, and I was just a desperate man trying to save the person who'd saved him his whole life. We were both drowning, just in different oceans. "Tomorrow," Vivian said as Philippa came to help her from the table, "we have our first public appearance, the Magnolia Foundation Gala. All of Atlanta's old money will be there, including my family. They don't know about you yet. Tomorrow, they will. Wear the tuxedo I had Philippa put in your closet. Prepare yourself, Jericho. Tomorrow, the show begins for real." She was wheeled away, leaving me alone in that dining room with half-finished food and the weight of what was coming. I walked back to my wing, found the tuxedo hanging in the closet, probably cost more than 3 months of my old salary, and stood there holding it, thinking about masks and performances, and how sometimes the truest thing you can do is pretend to be something you're not. I called Mama that night, told her I loved her, listened to her talk about how the first round of chemo went better than expected, how she was feeling hopeful. And I didn't tell her that her hope was built on my lie, that her son had sold himself to save her, that I was now married to a stranger who was testing me in ways I didn't understand yet. Some truths, I thought, are more merciful when they stay hidden. But that thought felt like another compromise, another piece of myself I was trading away. The Magnolia Foundation Gala was held in the ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel, a space so grand it made me feel like I was shrinking just by standing in it. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from the ceiling. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns that probably cost more than cars moved through the space like they owned the air itself. I stood near the entrance next to Vivian's wheelchair, my hand resting on the back of it as Philippa had instructed, a gesture that said protective husband without being too intimate. Vivian had been made up professionally for this event, her thin white hair styled elegantly, diamond earrings catching the light, that purple dress replaced by black silk that somehow made her look both regal and ghostly at once. "Smile," she murmured without moving her lips. "You look like you're attending a funeral." "Feels like I'm attending mine," I muttered back. She laughed softly, a genuine sound this time, not the crackling cough from dinner. "There's hope for you yet. Remember what I told you. When they offer you money to leave, act insulted. When they threaten you, act bored. When they try to befriend you, be polite but distant. Trust no one in this room except me, and I'm not entirely sure you should trust me either. Before I could respond, a wave of people descended on us. Wealthy donors and society types wanting to greet Vivian Ashford, the grand old dame of Atlanta philanthropy. They all said the same things in different words. How wonderful to see her, how brave she was, how they'd been praying for her. Not one of them mentioned that she looked like death wearing diamonds. Not one of them asked her how she actually felt. Then I saw them approaching, the family from the photographs. Cunningham Ashford moved through the crowd like a shark through water, tall and broad-shouldered in an expensive tuxedo, his wife trailing behind him in ice blue silk. His face was the kind of handsome that came from good genetics and better dentists, but his eyes had that look, the look of someone calculating value in every interaction. He stopped in front of Vivian's wheelchair, and his smile was practiced, perfect, and completely empty. "Aunt Vivian, you're looking well this evening." It was such an obvious lie it almost became performance art. Then his eyes shifted to me, and the smile flickered. Just for a second, but I saw it, confusion, followed by something sharper. "And who is this?" "Cunningham," Vivian said with sugary sweetness that could have rotted teeth. "I'd like you to meet my husband, Jericho Stone." "Jericho, this is my nephew Cunningham, who's been so attentive during my illness. Haven't you, dear?" The ballroom might as well have stopped spinning. Cunningham's face went through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, confusion, anger, then back to that practiced smile, but now it was painted over fury like cheap makeup over a bruise. "I'm sorry, Aunt Vivian. I must have misheard. Did you say husband?" His wife, a blonde woman who looked like she'd been carved from ice and ambition, actually gasped, a small, delicate sound that carried the weight of scandal. "You heard correctly," Vivian said, reaching up to take my hand with her trembling one. I took it, feeling how cold her skin was, how fragile her bones felt under that papery flesh. "Jericho and I were married last week in a private ceremony. I know it seems sudden, but when you're my age and in my condition, you learn that life is too short to wait for perfect timing. I'm quite happy. I hope you'll be happy for me." The way she said it was a challenge, daring him to object, to cause a scene in front of all these people. Cunningham's jaw tightened. "Of course. How wonderful. Though I'm surprised you didn't mention this before. When we spoke on Tuesday, you said nothing about an engagement or wedding plans." "Some decisions don't require a committee, dear," Vivian said. "I'm still of sound mind, despite what you and your lawyers might hope. Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to introduce my husband to some friends." She gestured for me to push her wheelchair, and we moved away, leaving Cunningham standing there looking like someone had just stolen his inheritance, which, I realized, was exactly what had happened from his perspective. As we rolled through the crowd, I could feel eyes on us now, whispers spreading like wildfire, the dying heiress, the young black man, the shock of it all. This was going to be in the society pages tomorrow. This was going to be everywhere. We stopped near the bar, and that's when I met Beatrice Langford. She materialized out of the crowd like a storm front, wearing red silk and a smile that could cut glass. She was tall, elegant in the way wealthy white women often are, tennis club posture, hair that cost hundreds to make look effortless, jewelry that announced wealth without screaming it. "Vivian," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "I heard the most extraordinary rumor. Surely it can't be true." She looked at me like I was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "You didn't actually marry this young man, did you? Please tell me Cunningham misunderstood," Vivian said, and there was steel under the frailty now. "How lovely to see you. Yes, Jericho and I are married. He's been a tremendous comfort during this difficult time. I'd like to think he loves me for more than my money, but I suppose we'll find out when I'm gone, won't we?" It was such a strange thing to say, throwing suspicion on our marriage while defending it at the same time. Beatrice's perfectly made-up face tightened. "Vivian, we need to talk, privately. There are implications, legal implications. You can't just marry a stranger and—" "I can do exactly what I want with my life and my money," Vivian interrupted, her voice rising just enough to be heard by nearby guests. "I'm dying, Beatrice, not dead yet. I'm not senile. I'm not being manipulated. I'm making my own choices. which is apparently so shocking to my family that they can't believe it's possible. The confrontation was drawing attention now. People were pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. I felt like an animal in a zoo, on display, being judged by people who'd already decided I was guilty of something. That's when an older woman approached, Lorraine Ashford, Vivian's sister, according to the photos. She had to be mid-70s, but she'd clearly had work done, face pulled tight, lips plumped, trying to fight time with money and surgery. She looked at me with naked disgust. So it's true. You've married a gold digger. Vivian, this is pathetic, even for you. How much is he getting? What did you promise him? Because whatever it is, I promise you we will contest it in court. We will destroy any will or trust that benefits this opportunist. I should have stayed quiet. That was the smart play. But something in the way she said opportunist, the way she looked at me like I was trash that had wandered in off the street, it hit every wound from every time someone had made me feel small because I was poor, because I was black, because I wasn't born into rooms like this. Ma'am, I said, keeping my voice level and respectful even though I wanted to match her venom. I understand this is surprising. I understand you're concerned about your sister. But I love Vivian, and I'm going to take care of her for as long as she has left. What happens after that? I paused, looking at Vivian, seeing something flicker in her eyes, something almost like approval. That's between me, her, and God. But I'm not going anywhere. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. I love Vivian. But it had to be said, had to be performed, because that's what this whole night was, a performance of devotion for an audience of vultures. Lorraine looked like she wanted to spit at me. Beatrice looked calculating, already planning her next move. Cunningham had rejoined the group, and his face was a mask of barely controlled rage. And Vivian looked up at me from her wheelchair, and for just a moment I saw something in her eyes that I couldn't quite read. Pride? Amusement? Or something else? Something deeper and stranger that made my stomach twist with unease. Well, Vivian said into the tension, I think that's enough family reunion for one evening. Jericho, take me outside. I need air. I pushed her wheelchair through the ballroom, feeling the weight of every stare, every whispered conversation we just triggered. Outside on the terrace, the Atlanta night was warm and humid. The city lights spread out below us like fallen stars. Vivian was quiet for a long moment, just breathing, her chest rising and falling with effort. You did well in there, she finally said. Better than I expected. You didn't crack under pressure. You played the devoted husband perfectly. Even that little speech about love and God, very convincing. It didn't feel convincing, I said. It felt like the worst kind of lie. She turned her head to look at me, and in the soft outdoor light, I could see past the makeup to the reality underneath. The gray skin, the sunken eyes, the way death was slowly claiming her piece by piece. All marriage is performance, Jericho. The happy couples you see holding hands, finishing each other's sentences, that's theater too. They're performing happiness for the world, maybe even for themselves. At least we're honest about our performance. At least we know we're acting. She coughed, a wet, rattling sound that seemed to come from deep in her chest. I knelt beside her wheelchair, concerned, but she waved me off. I'm fine. This is normal now. Pain is normal. Dying is normal. What's not normal is having someone by my side who isn't counting the days until I'm gone so they can start spending my money, even if you are counting the days for different reasons. She reached out and touched my face, her hand ice cold against my skin, and looked at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Tell me something true, Jericho. In this moment, away from the performance, do you hate me for putting you in this position? For making you lie to your mother? For turning you into someone you never wanted to be? I thought about it, really thought about the answer, because something in her voice said she needed honesty more than kindness right now. I don't hate you, I said slowly. I hate the situation. I hate that the world is built in a way that makes deals like ours necessary. I hate that saving my mother means compromising who I am. But you? No. You're dying and you're scared and you're alone and you're doing what you can to maintain some control in a situation where you have none. I can't hate you for that. I'd probably do the same thing. Her eyes glistened, Tears, maybe, or just the reflection of the city lights. You're either a very good man or a very good liar. I'm not sure which would be worse for you in the end. She pulled her hand back, and the moment broke. Take me home, Jericho. I'm tired, and tomorrow we have more battles to fight. They're going to come at you with everything they have. Money, threats, investigations. They'll dig up every mistake you've ever made and try to bury you with it. As I wheeled her back inside to leave, I caught sight of Cunningham across the ballroom. He was on his phone, talking intensely, his face dark with determination. When he looked up and our eyes met, the message was clear as words. This isn't over. You're not family. You're prey, and we're going to tear you apart. I pushed Vivienne toward the exit, that tuxedo feeling tighter now, like it was suffocating me, like I'd put on someone else's skin, and now I couldn't take it off. In the car ride home, a black Mercedes with a driver who'd been waiting outside, Vivienne fell asleep almost immediately, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, soft snores mixing with labored breathing. I watched the Atlanta streets pass by the window and wondered, how long can someone pretend to be something they're not before the performance becomes reality? How many lies can you tell before you forget what truth feels like? My phone buzzed. A text from Mama. Treatment going well. Doctor says I'm responding better than expected. You're my miracle, baby. Thank you for everything. I stared at those words, at miracle and thank you, and felt something crack inside my chest. She thought I was saving her with hard work and dedication. She had no idea I was saving her with deception and desperation. She was thanking me for becoming someone she'd be ashamed to know. I typed back, love you, Mama. Rest well. Then I put the phone away and closed my eyes, sitting in the back of a car that cost more than everything I'd ever owned combined, next to a dying woman who was either my savior or my destroyer, heading back to a house that would never be home, living a life that would never be mine. And somewhere in all that darkness, I heard a voice in my head, my own voice, but distant, like it was calling from very far away, asking a question I didn't want to answer. When this is over, when Mama is saved and Vivienne is gone, and I have everything I thought I wanted, will I recognize the man looking back at me in the mirror? Or will he be a stranger wearing my face? Monday morning came with the weight of a hammer. I was in my wing of the house, trying to work remotely. My insurance job still existed in theory, though I'd taken a leave of absence, when Philippa knocked on my door. Mr. Stone, there's someone here to see you, a private investigator. Mrs. Ashford said to let him in, but she wanted me to warn you first. My stomach dropped. That was fast. Less than 48 hours since the gala, and they'd already sent someone to dig into my life. I followed Philippa downstairs to find a man in his 50s sitting in the library, the same room where I'd signed the contract that had changed everything. He stood when I entered, average height, gray suit, carrying a worn leather briefcase that had seen years of use. His face was weathered, neutral, the face of someone who'd heard every excuse and seen every kind of desperate. Mr. Stone, he said, extending his hand. My name is Marcus Webb. I've been retained by the Ashford family to conduct a background investigation. I'd like to ask you some questions, if you don't mind. I shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the way his eyes never left mine, searching for tells, for weaknesses. I'm guessing I don't really have a choice, I said. He smiled slightly. You always have choices. You could refuse to speak with me. You could lawyer up. But Mrs. Ashford advised me you'd agreed to cooperate fully. She said transparency was part of your arrangement. Of course she did. This was probably one of her tests, see how I'd handle being investigated, see if I'd crack under scrutiny. We sat, and Marcus Webb opened his briefcase, pulling out a yellow legal pad covered in notes. I've already run the basics, he said conversationally. Jericho Stone, born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, June 15, 1990. Mother Ruth Stone, father James Stone, whereabouts unknown since 2005. 2 younger sisters, Keisha and Tamra. You graduated high school with honors, worked your way through community college, got an associate's degree in business administration. Moved to Atlanta 4 years ago, been working at Piedmont Insurance ever since. Clean criminal record, no arrests, no warrants, not even a speeding ticket in the last 5 years. On paper, you're exactly what you appear to be, a working class guy trying to make something of himself. But, I said, because there was always a but in conversations like this. Marcus tilted his head slightly. But you also have $47,000 in debt, student loans, medical bills for your mother, credit cards maxed out at high interest rates. Your checking account was overdrawn 3 times in the last 6 months. You were 30 days from eviction from your apartment when you suddenly moved into the Ashford estate. And 6 weeks ago, you Googled how to marry for money in Sugar Mama, Atlanta. Heat flooded my face. I had done that, late one desperate night after another call from a collections agency, half joking but half serious, looking for options, looking for any way out of the hole I was drowning in. I never actually pursued anything from those searches, I said. It was just research, desperation research. I believe you, Marcus said, and surprisingly, his tone wasn't judgmental. People do a lot of desperate Googling at 3 in the morning. But here's what the family is going to say. You were actively looking for a wealthy woman to marry. Then, conveniently, you met Mrs. Ashford at a charity event. They're going to argue you targeted her, that you manipulated a dying woman, that this marriage is a fraud designed to steal her inheritance. Can you see how that narrative works against you? I could. God, I could see it so clearly it made my chest tight. That the truth is almost worse than their version, I said quietly. She approached me. She offered me the deal. I said yes because I was desperate. It's not a love marriage. We both know that. But it's not fraud either. We have a legal contract. We're both consenting adults. She's dying and doesn't want to be alone. I need money to save my mother. It's a business arrangement. Marcus wrote something down. And you're comfortable with that? Marrying someone for money? Most people would find that morally complicated. I met his eyes directly. Most people haven't watched their mother work 3 jobs and still not have enough. Most people haven't had to choose between groceries and electricity. Most people haven't been one car accident away from homelessness their entire lives. Yeah, it's morally complicated. Everything about being poor is morally complicated. You make compromises rich people never have to think about. You do things that middle-class people would judge you for because they've never been hungry enough to understand. So yeah, I married Vivienne for money, and I'll live with whatever guilt comes with that, because the alternative was watching my mama die slowly from a cancer she can't afford to fight. There was a long silence. Marcus studied me with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. Finally, he said, "The family also wants me to investigate your relationship with Mrs. Ashford. They think it's suspicious that a 34-year-old man would be interested in an 81-year-old dying woman. They're implying impropriety. They want me to find evidence that you're abusing her somehow, financially or otherwise." Anger flared hot in my chest. I've never touched Vivienne inappropriately. I've never taken a dime beyond what our contract specifies. I push her wheelchair. I sit with her during doctor's appointments. I eat dinner with her and listen to her stories about her dead husband. That's it. If that's abuse, then every hospice worker in America is guilty. Marcus raised his hands in a calming gesture. I'm not accusing you, Mr. Stone. I'm telling you what they're saying, so you know what's coming. Cunningham Ashford is particularly determined. He's retained his own attorneys. They're looking for any angle to invalidate this marriage or contest the will when Mrs. Ashford passes. They're going to dig into your past, interview your ex-girlfriends, talk to your former employers, maybe even approach your family. That last part hit like a punch. They better not contact my mother, I said, my voice harder than I intended. She's going through chemo. She doesn't need harassment from some rich people trying to protect their inheritance. Marcus made a note. I'll pass that along. Though I should tell you, the family considers this their money you're trying to take. They're not going to fight fair. Neither is Vivienne, I said. They think I'm the only player in this game, but she's got moves they haven't seen yet. She's smarter than all of them combined. Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. You sound almost protective of her. For a business arrangement, you seem to have developed some attachment. Had I? I thought about the dinners we'd shared, the way she'd looked at me on the terrace at the gala, the strange honesty we'd found in our mutual deception. She's alone, I said finally, and she's dying. Whatever our arrangement is, She's still a human being who deserves dignity. If her family can't see that, then yeah, maybe I am protective of her. The investigator packed up his notes, preparing to leave. One more thing, Mr. Stone. Mrs. Ashford has had 3 previous marriages before her husband, Richard. Did you know that? I didn't. That wasn't in any of the information she'd given me. No, I said slowly. She never mentioned that. Marcus pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. The first marriage was annulled after 6 months, 1965, to a man named Gregory Halverson. The second marriage lasted a year, 1967, to Thomas Brightwell. Both times, the marriages ended with significant financial settlements paid to Mrs. Ashford. She didn't marry Richard until 1970. I'm not saying this to suggest anything improper, but the family is going to use this history to paint her as someone who has a pattern of strategic marriages. I opened the folder, staring at old marriage certificates, divorce paperwork, newspaper clippings from society pages showing a young, beautiful Vivian with different men. She'd been married 3 times before Richard? Why hadn't she told me this? What else hadn't she told me? Marcus stood. I'll be filing my report with the family by the end of the week. My job was to find dirt, to find something that would prove you're a con artist. Honestly, you're just a broke guy who made a desperate choice. But here's my advice, off the record, be very careful. Vivian Ashford is not the frail, dying grandmother she appears to be. She's a survivor who knows how to play long games. And if you're not careful, you might find yourself playing a game where you don't even know the rules. He left, and I sat alone in that library with the folder of Vivian's past marriages, feeling the floor shift under me. Why would she hide this? What did it mean? I heard a sound and looked up to find Vivian in the doorway. No wheelchair this time. Standing on her own 2 feet, leaning heavily on Philippa for support, but standing, her eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. Did you enjoy your conversation with Mr. Webb? She asked, her voice different somehow, stronger, clearer, less frail than it had been all week. How much did he tell you about my colorful past? I held up the folder. Enough to make me wonder what else you haven't told me. She smiled, that sad, knowing smile, and took a step forward, Philippa supporting her weight. Oh, Jericho, we're just getting to the interesting part. You wanted to know why I chose you, why I trusted you with my money, my home, my secrets. She took another step, and I realized with growing unease that she was moving better than she had at the gala, moving like someone who was sick but not dying, not the way she'd been presenting herself. It's because I needed someone who was desperate enough to say yes, but moral enough to hesitate. Someone who would feel guilty about our arrangement. Someone who would try to be good even while doing something he thinks is wrong. That kind of person. That's someone I can trust, because they'll hold themselves accountable even when no one else is watching. She was right in front of me now, close enough that I could smell that medicinal scent under her expensive perfume. Close enough to see the wrinkles that were definitely real, the age spots that couldn't be faked. But something in her eyes, something in the way she held herself, made me question everything I thought I knew. What game are we playing? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because I'm starting to think there are rules you haven't told me yet. Vivian reached out and patted my cheek, the same gesture she'd made at the gala, but now it felt different, felt calculated. The game, my dear Jericho, is called survival, and the first rule is simple. Trust no one completely, not even your allies, especially not your allies. She turned to leave, Philippa helping her, but paused at the door. Oh, and that folder Marcus left? Those marriages? All 3 of those men tried to take advantage of me when I was young and naive. All 3 of them learned very expensive lessons about underestimating Vivian Ashford. Just something to keep in mind. She left, and I stood there holding a folder full of questions, surrounded by books and wealth and the smell of old money, feeling like I'd just discovered I was swimming in waters much deeper and darker than I'd realized. My phone buzzed. Keisha, my younger sister. Hey, big bro, someone came by the house today asking questions about you. Said he was from some law firm in Atlanta. Mama got upset, thought you were in trouble. What's going on? You good? They'd already started circling my family, already started trying to find cracks in my story. I typed back a lie. Just some confusion with work stuff. Nothing to worry about. I'll handle it. How's Mama feeling today? But my hands were shaking as I sent it because I was starting to realize that this deal I'd made, this bargain with a dying woman who maybe wasn't as dying as she appeared, was going to cost me more than I'd calculated. The price wasn't just 6 months of my life. It wasn't just the guilt of lying to my mother. It was something deeper, something I couldn't quite name yet, but could feel waiting in the shadows of this enormous house, watching me, testing me, preparing to teach me the same expensive lessons those 3 other men had learned. I thought about running, thought about walking out those iron gates and never looking back, letting Mama's medical bills pile up, letting my sisters stay stuck in Baton Rouge, letting my life go back to the struggling, barely surviving existence I'd known before. But I didn't, because whatever game Vivian was playing, whatever secret she was hiding, I was already all in. I'd already signed the contract. I'd already lied to everyone I loved. There was no walking away now, even if I wanted to. I was trapped in a palace made of compromise, married to a ghost who wore different masks depending on who was watching, waiting to see which version of myself would emerge when the performance finally ended and the real game began. 2 weeks after the gala, I started noticing things that didn't add up. Small things at first. The kind of details you dismiss because your brain wants the world to make sense, like how Vivian would be hunched over in her wheelchair during family visits, barely able to lift her head, but I'd catch glimpses of her through doorways when she thought no one was watching, standing straighter, moving with less pain, or how her medication schedule seemed inconsistent. Sometimes Philippa would bring her pills every 4 hours like clockwork. Other times she'd skip doses entirely. Or the way certain rooms in the house were always locked, including one at the end of Vivian's wing that I'd never been inside. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, that dying people had good days and bad days, that medication schedules changed based on symptoms. But something in my gut, that same instinct that had kept me safe growing up in rough neighborhoods, that had told me when someone was lying or when danger was close, that instinct was screaming that something was wrong. I started paying closer attention, started watching the way Vivian watched me, like I was a science experiment she was documenting. Started noticing how Philippa and Delia would exchange looks when they thought I wasn't paying attention, looks that said they knew something I didn't. The family had gone quiet after the initial confrontation, which worried me more than their open hostility. Cunningham hadn't called or visited. Beatrice had stopped her Sunday appearances. Even Lorraine, who'd been so vocal at the gala, had gone silent. It felt like the calm before a hurricane, like they were gathering strength, building their case, preparing for war. Marcus Webb's report must have been filed by now. Whatever he'd told them, it had changed their strategy from direct attack to something more calculated. I wondered what they were planning, what move they'd make next. I didn't have to wonder long. It was a Thursday afternoon when Vivian called me to her wing. I found her in her sitting room, a space I rarely entered, decorated in soft creams and golds, with windows overlooking the gardens. She was in her wheelchair again, bundled in blankets despite the warm Atlanta spring, looking every bit the frail, dying woman. But her eyes were sharp, focused, almost excited. "Jericho, sit. We need to talk about your performance so far." Performance. She always used that word, reminding me that none of this was real, that we were actors in a play only we knew was fiction. I sat across from her, my stomach tight with anxiety. "What about it?" "You've done well with the family," she said. "Better than I expected, actually. You didn't take Cunningham's bait at the gala. You didn't crack under Marcus Webb's investigation. You've played the devoted husband convincingly. But now comes the hard part." She leaned forward slightly, and I saw something flicker across her face. Pain, maybe, or something she wanted me to think was pain. "My health is declining faster than the doctors predicted. They're saying weeks now, not months, which means we need to accelerate our timeline." My heart dropped. Weeks? I'd been prepared for this marriage to last until summer, maybe early fall. If she only had weeks, that changed everything. The timeline, the plan, my ability to save enough for Mama's full treatment course. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Whatever else this was, watching someone die was never easy. What do you need from me? I need you to move into the main house, she said. Into the bedroom next to mine. The family is watching, and if you're in a separate wing, they'll use that to argue we're not a real married couple. They'll say you're just a caretaker with a fraudulent marriage license. You need to be close to me, visible, present at all times. Can you do that? It felt like the walls were closing in. Moving closer meant less privacy, less space to think, less ability to process what was happening. But I'd signed the contract. I'd agreed to play this role. Of course, I said, whatever you need. She smiled, that sad, knowing smile that always made me uncomfortable. Good. Pack your things tonight. Philippa will prepare the room. And Jericho, there's something else. The family has requested a meeting. All of them. Cunningham, Beatrice, Lorraine, even some cousins you haven't met yet. They wanted to discuss my estate planning. They want to make one more attempt to change my mind about you. When? I asked. Tomorrow. Here at the house. 2:00. I want you present for the whole thing. I want them to see us together, to see that I've made my choice and I'm not changing it. This will be ugly, Jericho. They're going to offer you money to leave, probably a substantial amount. 6 figures, maybe 7. You're going to refuse. You're going to tell them you love me and you're staying by my side until the end. Can you do that? Can you sell that lie even when they're waving financial freedom in your face? I thought about it. What would 6 figures mean? Enough to save Mama, probably. Enough to get my sisters started in better lives. Enough to walk away from this increasingly strange situation with some dignity intact. But if I took their money and left, I'd get nothing from Vivian's estate. I'd have betrayed the contract. And somehow, impossibly, I'd also feel like I betrayed her. I'll refuse, I said. I'll play my part. That night, I moved my belongings into the bedroom next to Vivian's. The room was larger than my previous space, decorated in deep blues and mahogany, with a massive 4-poster bed that felt like sleeping in a museum. The walls were thin. I could hear everything from Vivian's room next door. Her labored breathing, the soft murmur of Philippa checking on her, the sounds of someone dying slowly, one painful breath at a time. Except sometimes, in the quiet hours past midnight, I'd hear other sounds. Footsteps, normal footsteps, not shuffling or weak. The sound of drawers opening and closing. Once, I could have sworn I heard her voice, clear and strong, talking to someone on the phone. But when I pressed my ear to the wall, the sound would stop, replaced by that labored breathing again. I told myself I was hearing things, that the stress was making me paranoid. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in a house full of ghosts, and I couldn't tell which ones were real. The family arrived at 2:00 sharp, rolling up to the estate in expensive cars like a funeral procession for someone not yet dead. I watched from an upstairs window as they gathered in the foyer. Cunningham in another perfect suit, Beatrice dripping in jewelry that could have paid off my old debts 10 times over, Lorraine leaning on a designer cane she probably didn't need, and 3 others I didn't recognize. Cousins, probably, or lawyers disguised as family. They looked like a pack of wolves dressed for Sunday service, polite smiles hiding predatory intent. This was it, the moment Vivian had been preparing me for. The final test before her death made everything permanent. Philippa had dressed Vivian carefully for this meeting. Another silk dress, this one dove gray, her thin hair arranged to look as frail as possible. Oxygen tubes running from her nose to a portable tank. She looked like she might shatter if someone breathed on her too hard. But when she looked at me and winked, actually winked, I realized this was all staging. She was performing dying the way an actress performs Shakespeare, and I was the only other person who knew we were putting on a show. We met them in the formal living room, a space so grand it made the library look cozy. I stood behind Vivian's wheelchair, my hand on her shoulder. The protective husband, the devoted caretaker, the man who'd chosen love over money. That's what they needed to see. That's what I needed to sell. Cunningham took the lead, sitting across from us with the casual authority of someone who'd always gotten what he wanted. Aunt Vivian, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. We're all very concerned about your well-being, and we think it's time we had an honest conversation about your recent marriage. He said marriage like it was a disease. Vivian's hand found mine, squeezing with surprising strength. Speak plainly, Cunningham. You've never been one for subtlety. What do you leaned back, crossing his legs? We want to make sure you're protected, that you're not being taken advantage of. And we have some concerns about Mr. Stone's intentions. His eyes shifted to me, cold and assessing. We've done our research. We know about your debt. We know about your mother's cancer. We know you were facing financial ruin before you conveniently met our aunt at a charity event. It's all very convenient. Life is full of convenient coincidence, I said, keeping my voice steady. I met Vivian. We connected. We fell in love. Her being wealthy doesn't change that. Beatrice laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. Please, you expect us to believe a 34-year-old man fell in love with an 81-year-old dying woman? That this has nothing to do with her $32 million estate? We're not fools, Mr. Stone. Vivian's grip on my hand tightened to the point of pain. My age and my illness are not reasons I can't be loved. You think I'm too old, too sick, too far gone to deserve companionship? That says more about you than it does about Jericho. Her voice was strong, indignant, and I realized she was performing this perfectly. The dying woman defending her last chance at happiness against her cruel, greedy family. Lorraine stood up, moving with more agility than her cane suggested she needed. Vivian, we're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to protect you. This man is after your money. It's obvious. And we're prepared to do whatever it takes to prevent this fraud from succeeding. She turned to me, and her eyes were like ice. Mr. Stone, we're prepared to make you an offer, a generous one. $500,000 cash if you annul this marriage and leave this house within the week. You can save your mother. You can pay off your debts. You can start over with a clean slate. All you have to do is walk away. The number hung in the air like smoke. $500,000, more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. Enough to solve every problem that had driven me to this desperate arrangement in the first place. I felt Vivian's hand trembling in mine. Or was that my hand trembling? The room seemed to tilt slightly, the weight of the offer pressing down on me like gravity had doubled. I'm not leaving, I said, the words coming out rougher than I intended. I love Vivian. I'm staying. Cunningham stood now, his face hardening. Then let's be clear about what's going to happen. We're going to contest this marriage in court. We're going to argue that our aunt was mentally incompetent when she married you, that she was under undue influence, that this entire arrangement is fraudulent. We'll drag your name through every newspaper in Atlanta. We'll investigate your mother, your sisters, everyone you've ever known. We'll make your life a nightmare. And when Vivian passes, which will be soon, based on what her doctors are telling us, you won't see a penny of her estate. We'll tie it up in legal battles for years. By the time the courts are finished with you, you'll wish you'd taken the $500,000. The threat was clear, brutal, effective. They were going to destroy me either way, take the money and walk, or stay and fight a war I couldn't possibly win. I looked at Vivian, expecting her to say something, to defend me or threaten them back. But she was quiet, watching me with those sharp eyes, waiting to see what I'd do. This was another test. This was her seeing if I'd break under real pressure, if I'd take the escape route they were offering. And something in me, maybe pride, maybe stubbornness, maybe just the exhaustion of being pushed around by people who'd never known what it meant to have nothing, something made me stand straighter and look Cunningham dead in the eye. Do your worst, I said. Investigate me. Drag my name through the papers. Tie everything up in court for decades. I don't care. I'm not leaving Vivian. Not for $500,000. Not for $5 million. Because unlike all of you, I actually see her as a person, not a bank account with a pulse. You want to know why she chose me? Because I'm the only one in this room who's not counting down the days until she dies so I can start spending her money. I'm just trying to make sure she doesn't die alone, surrounded by people who see her as an obstacle between them and their inheritance. The words came out hot and angry, and I realized with surprise that they were at least partly true. Somewhere in the performance, somewhere between the lies and the contract and the guilt, I'd started actually caring about this strange dying woman who'd given me a chance when I had none. The room went silent. The family looked at each other, their strategy clearly not accounting for genuine resistance. Vivian made a sound, a laugh or a sob, I couldn't tell. And when I looked down at her, I saw tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "Get out," she said, her voice breaking. "All of you. Get out of my house. You'll have your chance to contest the will when I'm dead. But while I'm alive, while I still have breath in my body, this is my home and Jericho is my husband. Leave. Now." Philippa appeared from nowhere, opening the door, and the family filed out in angry silence. Cunningham paused at the door, looking back at me with pure hatred. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," he said. Then they were gone, and it was just me and Vivienne and the echoing silence of that enormous room. She was still crying, soft, shaking sobs that made her whole body tremble. I knelt beside her wheelchair, concerned. "Vivienne, are you okay? Do you need your medication? Should I call the doctor?" She looked at me through her tears, and something in her expression was strange. Not sad, not afraid, but something else I couldn't identify. "You meant it," she whispered. "When you said you cared, some of it was real. I could hear it in your voice. I didn't know how to respond to that, because she was right. Somewhere in the lies, something true had emerged. Some of it, I admitted. Yeah, some of it's real." She reached up and touched my face again, her cold fingers tracing my cheek. "Good," she said. "That's good. Because what comes next is going to require you to trust me completely, and I need to know you're ready for the truth." My stomach dropped. What truth? But she was already being wheeled away by Philippa, leaving me alone in that grand room with more questions than answers and the sinking feeling that I was about to discover something that would change everything I thought I knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house made sounds, settling sounds, creaking sounds, the whisper of expensive air conditioning through vents, but underneath it all, I kept hearing footsteps from Vivienne's room. Clear, steady footsteps. Not the shuffle of a dying woman, but the walk of someone healthy. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling until 2 a.m, then made a decision that probably broke our contract in about 15 different ways. I got up, moved quietly to the door connecting our rooms, and pressed my ear against it. Silence at first. Then voices, Vivienne's voice, strong and clear, and Philippa's, discussing something I couldn't quite make out. I tried the doorknob. Locked. But the old house had those skeleton key locks, and I'd learned something about picking them from a cousin back in Baton Rouge who'd spent time in places he shouldn't have been. I went back to my room, found a paperclip, straightened it, and returned to that door. My hands were shaking as I worked the lock, partly from nerves, partly from the knowledge that if I was caught, if Vivienne considered this a betrayal, I'd lose everything. The lock clicked. I eased the door open an inch, just enough to see into her room. What I saw made my blood turn to ice water. Vivienne was standing in front of her mirror, standing without assistance, without trembling, without the bent posture of illness. She was removing something from her face, peeling it away carefully, like you'd remove a bandage. Prosthetics. Age makeup. I watched in frozen horror as she pulled away latex wrinkles, wiped off age spots that had been painted on, removed padding that had made her look skeletal. When she turned slightly, I saw her real face in the mirror's reflection. She wasn't 81. She couldn't be. The woman looking back from that mirror was maybe 60, still older, still marked by time, but healthy, alive, not dying. The gray hair was a wig. The trembling hands had been performance. The labored breathing had been acting. Everything, the wheelchair, the oxygen tank, the medications, the frailty, all of it had been an elaborate lie. I stumbled backward, my mind trying to process what I'd just seen, but unable to make it make sense. This wasn't possible. Her doctors had confirmed she was dying. Medical records had documented her condition. Unless all of that had been fabricated too. Unless this entire situation was something bigger and stranger and more calculated than I'd ever imagined. I made it back to my bed, closed my eyes, and pretended to sleep even though my heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. What was I supposed to do with this information? Confront her? Run? Call the police, though I had no idea what crime had been committed? I'd signed a contract. I'd taken her money. I was complicit in whatever this was, even if I didn't understand it. Hours passed. Dawn came through the windows like a slow reveal. I heard Vivian's door open, heard Philippa's voice. "Are you ready, Mrs. Ashford?" "Almost," came the reply, that crackling, weak voice again, the performance back in place. "Make sure Jericho is awake. I need to speak with him. It's time." Philippa knocked on my door minutes later. "Mr. Stone, Mrs. Ashford would like to see you. She says it's urgent." I got dressed on autopilot, my mind still reeling from what I'd witnessed. When I entered Vivian's room, she was back in character, hunched in her wheelchair, oxygen tubes in place, looking like death's patient waiting room. But now that I knew it was a performance, I could see the tells. The way her eyes were too alert, the way her breathing wasn't quite as labored as she pretended, the way she watched me with the intensity of someone waiting for a reaction. "Jericho," she said weakly, "sit. I have something to tell you, something I should have told you weeks ago." I sat, my hands clenched so tight my fingernails dug into my palms. "What is it?" She looked at Philippa, nodded, and Philippa left the room, closing the door behind her. Then Vivian sat up straighter, not all the way, but enough that the performance cracked at the edges. "You've been a better actor than I expected," she said, her voice slightly stronger now. "You almost convinced me that some of your care was genuine, but I think it's time you understood what you're really part of, what you agreed to when you signed that contract." She reached up and removed the oxygen tubes. "I'm not dying, Jericho. I never was." The words hung in the air, confirming what I'd seen, but still not making sense. "I saw the medical records," I said, my voice hollow. "The doctors confirmed." "Doctors can be paid," she interrupted. "Medical records can be created. When you have enough money and the right connections, you can fabricate an entire terminal illness. The cancer, the prognosis, the treatment timeline, all of it was theater. Very expensive, very elaborate theater, but theater nonetheless." She smiled, and without the pretense of dying frailty, the smile was sharper, more calculating. "You're wondering why. Why would someone go to such lengths? Why would I need to fake my own death?" I couldn't speak, couldn't process. My entire world was tilting on an axis that had just shifted without warning. "Because," Vivian continued, standing up from the wheelchair with only slight effort, the effort of someone in their 60s, not someone dying at 81. "I needed to know who I could trust. I needed to see what my family would do when they thought I was vulnerable. I needed to expose their greed, their willingness to fight over my money before I was even cold. And I needed someone like you, someone desperate enough to agree to this arrangement, but moral enough to struggle with it. Someone who would pass my tests, not because you're a saint, but because you're human, because you feel guilt, because you actually care, even when you're trying not to." She moved toward me, and I saw her now, the real woman underneath all the disguises, distinguished, elegant, marked by age but not destroyed by it, healthy, very much alive. "This whole thing," I said slowly, my voice shaking, "the marriage, the contract, the tests, it was all a setup? I was what? A pawn in some elaborate scheme to catch your family being greedy?" "Not just to catch them," Vivian said, "to document it. Every threat they made, every attempt to bribe you, every conversation about contesting my will, I've had it all recorded. Video, audio, witnessed by attorneys. When I die, when I fake my death, and the will is read, they're going to fight it exactly as they threatened. They're going to try to prove I was mentally incompetent. And that's when I'm going to reveal that I've been alive the whole time, that every word they said was captured, and that they're all being cut out of my estate completely for their behavior." I stood up, my legs unsteady. "And me? What am I in all this? Another person you manipulated?" Her expression softened slightly. "You're the only one who passed the test. You refused the bribe. You stood up to them even when it cost you. Yes, you married Vivian for money, but you treated me with dignity anyway. That's rare, Jericho. That's worth rewarding." She moved to a desk, pulled out documents. "The contract still stands. When this is all over, when I've exposed my family and secured my estate against their attempts to steal it, you'll still inherit everything we agreed upon. More, actually, because you exceeded my expectations. But first, I need you to do one more thing. I need you to help me die." The next week moved like a fever dream. Vivian explained her plan in detail. She'd stage her death, complete with a body that would pass initial examinations, a death certificate signed by a doctor on her payroll, and a funeral that would bring the family together to show their true colors. My role was to play the grieving husband, to sell the loss convincingly while wearing a wire that would record every conversation. They'll approach you at the funeral, she predicted. They'll offer condolences while trying to figure out how to contest the will. Cunningham will probably try to intimidate you into accepting a settlement. Beatrice will play sympathetic while gathering information. They'll show you exactly who they are when they think I can't see them anymore. And then, I asked. Then we reveal the truth, Vivienne said. In front of lawyers, in front of witnesses. We show them the recordings. We prove they were willing to fight over money before my body was even cold. We prove I was right to exclude them. And they'll have nothing. No inheritance, no dignity, nothing but the proof of their own greed. It was brilliant and cruel in equal measure, the kind of long-game manipulation that required patience and planning, and a fundamental belief that people would behave exactly as badly as you expected them to. I should have been horrified, should have refused. But something in me, maybe the part that had grown up watching rich people get away with everything while poor people suffered for minor mistakes, something in me wanted to see this play out, wanted to see justice, even if it came wrapped in deception. The death was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Vivienne took something that would slow her vital signs to near undetectable levels for several hours, some pharmaceutical cocktail that made me nervous just watching her swallow it. Philippa, who'd been in on the scheme from the beginning, made the emergency call. An ambulance came. EMTs who'd been paid to play along. They performed the scene perfectly, rushing upstairs, working on her, finally shaking their heads and calling time of death. I stood in the doorway, playing shocked, playing devastated. Tears that were actually real streaming down my face, because even knowing it was fake, watching someone pretend to die was more emotionally traumatic than I'd expected. The next 3 days were a blur of funeral arrangements and family members circling like sharks smelling blood in the water. Cunningham was especially present, offering to help with everything while clearly trying to assess the situation, trying to figure out if I was a threat or an easy target. At the viewing, Vivienne lying in a casket, makeup making her look dead, special effects that would have fooled anyone who wasn't looking for deception, I stood beside the casket playing the grieving husband while family members approached with sympathetic words and calculating eyes. "Jericho," Cunningham said, placing a hand on my shoulder in a gesture that was meant to look supportive but felt threatening. "I know this is difficult, and I know Vivienne made some unusual choices in her final months, but I want you to know we're prepared to be reasonable. If you're willing to work with us instead of against us, we can make this easy for everyone." "Work with you how?" I asked, the recording device hidden under my shirt capturing every word. Cunningham lowered his voice. "Between you and me? We both know this marriage was questionable. Vivienne wasn't herself at the end. The medication, the pain, the fear of dying alone. She made decisions she wouldn't have made in her right mind. The will she left is going to reflect that confusion. But if you're willing to acknowledge that, if you're willing to testify that she wasn't competent when she changed her estate planning, we can make sure you're taken care of. $2 million, clean, no legal battles. You walk away wealthy enough to never worry about money again." There it was, the bribe I'd refused before, now being offered over Vivienne's casket. The audacity of it, the complete lack of shame or decency, it made something hot and angry burn in my chest. "I'm not going to betray her memory," I said quietly. "Whatever you think about our marriage, she was my wife. She trusted me. I'm not going to sell that for any amount of money." Cunningham's grip on my shoulder tightened. "Then you're going to regret it. We're contesting the will. We're going to prove she was incompetent. And when we're done, you'll have nothing except legal bills and a reputation as the man who tried to steal from a dying woman. Last chance, Jericho. Take the deal." I pulled away from him. "The answer is no. It'll always be no. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to be alone with my wife." I stood by that casket, looking down at Vivienne's face painted to look like peaceful death. And I wondered, when this is all over, when the truth comes out and the family is exposed, will any of this have been worth it? Will the money I receive taste less like ashes if it comes with proof that rich people are exactly as terrible as I always believed they were? The funeral service was held the next day at a church I'd never been to, filled with people who'd never really known Vivian but showed up because that's what Atlanta society did, performed grief as social obligation. I gave a eulogy I'd written with Vivian's help, talking about her kindness, her strength, her dignity in facing death. Every word was a lie wrapped around a small truth, and I delivered it like I was delivering her actual eulogy, pouring genuine emotion into fake grief because the emotions themselves were real even if the situation wasn't. At the reception afterward, Beatrice cornered me near the catering table. "Jericho, I want to apologize for how we treated you. We were wrong. You clearly cared about Vivian, and she cared about you. I can see that now." The sudden shift was jarring, suspicious. "Thank you," I said carefully. She smiled, warm, sympathetic, completely fake. "I'm sure the next few months are going to be difficult. Estate proceedings, legal matters, all very complicated. If you need help navigating any of it, please let us know. We want to honor Vivian's wishes. Whatever she wanted for you, we'll support." Another recording captured, another lie documented. They were playing good now, trying to seem reasonable, probably preparing their legal strategy to argue that they'd been supportive and I'd been the manipulative one. The wake ended. The guests left. The family dispersed. And I went back to the Ashford estate, which was technically my estate now, according to the will, and found Vivian sitting in the library, very much alive, watching recordings of everything that had been said at her own funeral. "Well," she said when I entered, her real voice strange after days of silence. "How did I look? Convincing death scene?" I couldn't find words. The relief of seeing her alive mixed with anger at the manipulation, mixed with exhaustion from days of performance, created an emotional cocktail I couldn't name. "They took the bait," I finally said. "Every single one of them. They proved you right." She nodded, satisfied. "Of course they did. People always reveal their true character when they think no one's watching, when they think there are no consequences. That's when you see who they really are." She turned off the recordings, stood up with only slight effort from her chair. "The will reading is tomorrow. That's when they'll officially contest it. That's when we reveal the truth. Are you ready for the final act?" The will reading took place in the law offices of Whitmore and Associates, the same lawyer who'd drawn up our marriage contract. The family arrived expecting a formality, Vivian's will being read, the distribution of her estate being announced, and then the immediate challenge they'd prepared with their own attorneys. I sat in that conference room wearing a black suit, playing the grieving husband one last time, watching them file in with their lawyers like they were heading into battle they'd already won. Cunningham looked confident. Beatrice looked sympathetic. Lorraine looked bored, like this was all beneath her, but she had to show up for appearances. Charles Whitmore stood at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming. We're here to read the last will and testament of Vivian Ashford, who passed away 4 days ago." He opened a folder, began reading the standard legal language, the sound of his voice filling the space with words about estates and trusts and beneficiaries. But then he deviated from script. "However, before we proceed with the distribution, there's a matter that needs to be addressed. Mrs. Ashford predicted that her family would contest this based on claims of her mental incompetence. She was very specific in her instructions about how to handle that challenge, and so we've prepared a response." Cunningham leaned forward. "Whatever response she prepared, it doesn't matter. We have evidence that she was under undue influence at the time this will was drafted. We have expert testimony that will show." "You have nothing," a voice said from the doorway. Vivian's voice. The room went silent. Everyone turned. And there she was, Vivian Ashford, walking into the conference room on her own 2 feet, wearing an elegant navy suit, her real gray hair styled professionally, looking healthy and very much alive. The family's faces went through shock, confusion, then dawning horror as they realized what they were seeing. "Surprise," Vivian said calmly. "Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated." Cunningham stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "What the hell is this? You're supposed to be dead. We buried you. I saw your body." "You saw a very expensive prop," Vivian corrected, and a lot of theater, all of which was designed to expose exactly what I suspected, that not one of you cared about me as a person. You only cared about my money, and you were willing to do anything to get it. She moved to stand at the head of the table, commanding the room with an authority I'd never seen in her before. This was Vivian Ashford without pretense. Powerful, intelligent, ruthless. For the past 3 months, I've been running an experiment. I faked a terminal illness. I married a man you all dismissed as a gold digger, and I watched to see what you would do. Would you support me? Would you trust my judgment? Would you treat me with dignity, even if you disagreed with my choices? Beatrice found her voice. This is insane. You faked your own death? You put us through a funeral? You made us believe you were dying? What kind of sick game is this? The kind that reveals truth, Vivian said sharply. The kind that shows who people really are when they think there are no consequences. And you all failed spectacularly. Cunningham, you tried to bribe my husband 3 different times, including at my own funeral. Beatrice, you pretended to be supportive while gathering information for a legal challenge. Lorraine, you told your friends at the country club that I'd finally lost my mind and that you were going to fix my mess as soon as I was gone. I have recordings of all of it. Video, audio, documented by witnesses and attorneys. You're all being cut out of my estate completely. Not $1, not one property, nothing. The room erupted. Shouting, accusations, threats of lawsuits. Cunningham's face turned red with rage. You can't do this. We'll fight this. We'll prove you're mentally incompetent. This entire stunt proves you're not of sound mind. Actually, Charles Whitmore interjected calmly, Mrs. Ashford has been evaluated by 3 independent psychiatrists throughout this process, all of whom have confirmed she's of sound mind and body. The will is legal. The marriage is legal. The disinheritance is legal. You're welcome to challenge it in court, but I assure you, you'll lose, and the recordings of your behavior will become public record. Lorraine stood, leaning on her cane. And him. She pointed at me with venom. What about your precious husband? He married you for money too. He admitted it at the gala. How is he any different from us? Vivian turned to look at me, and something in her expression softened. Because when given the chance to betray me for money, he didn't. You offered him $500,000 to leave. You offered him $2 million to testify against my competence. He refused both times. He played his role, yes, but he also showed genuine care. He sat with me during medical appointments when he didn't have to. He defended me to your faces when it would have been easier to stay silent. He was desperate when he married me, yes, but he was also kind. That's the difference. She walked over to where I sat, and for the first time since entering the room, she looked uncertain, vulnerable. Jericho stood by a dying woman, even though I wasn't actually dying. He grieved at my funeral, even though he knew I'd be alive the next day. He passed every test I set for him, not because he's perfect, but because he's decent. And that, apparently, is rarer than I thought. The family was ushered out by security, still shouting threats and accusations, their lawyers already on phones preparing challenges that would ultimately fail. When they were gone, when it was just me and Vivian and Charles Whitmore in that conference room, I finally found my voice. You could have told me, I said quietly, about the fake death, about what you were planning. You could have trusted me with the truth instead of making me think I was watching you actually die. Vivian sat down, suddenly looking tired despite her health. I know, and I'm sorry for that. But I needed your reactions to be genuine. I needed the grief to look real. If you'd known, the performance wouldn't have worked. She pulled something from her purse. Not the contract I'd signed, but a new document. This is the real will. Your portion of the inheritance remains as promised. $32 million, the estate, everything we agreed upon. But there's an addendum. I took the document, scanned it, felt my heart stop when I read the additional clause. In recognition of services rendered and genuine companionship provided, Jericho Stone is also granted an additional $10 million in liquid assets, no strings attached, to be distributed immediately upon Mrs. Ashford's actual death or upon annulment of marriage at Mr. Stone's discretion. You're giving me $42 million total? I asked, my voice hollow. And the choice to leave whenever I want? Vivian nodded. I trapped you in a deal you couldn't refuse because you were desperate. That wasn't fair, no matter how well you performed. So now you have a real choice. You can stay married to me. I'm 64, not 81, so this might last decades instead of months. Or you can take the 10 million, annul the marriage, and walk away free. No judgment either way. You've earned the right to choose your own path. I stared at that document, at numbers that would change my life and my family's lives forever, at the choice between freedom and commitment, and I realized something profound. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. The man who'd entered this arrangement 3 months ago had been so desperate, so focused on survival, that he hadn't thought about anything beyond saving his mother. But now Mama's treatment was paid for, had been for weeks, secretly funded by Vivian's accounts. Now my sisters were enrolled in college, tuition covered anonymously. Now I was standing in a law office holding a document that gave me more money than I'd ever imagined, and I felt empty, lost, like I'd crossed a finish line only to discover I didn't remember why I'd been running. I need time, I said finally, to process all of this, to figure out who I am after everything that's happened. Vivian stood, and for the first time, she looked genuinely uncertain about my answer. Of course. Take all the time you need. The money is yours either way. You've earned it 10 times over. But Jericho, I want you to know something. She reached up and touched my face one more time, that gesture that had become familiar over our strange months together. What started as a performance, somewhere along the way, parts of it became real for me too. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not even asking you to stay. I'm just saying, whatever happens next, you weren't just a player in my game. You became something more, and I'm grateful for that. I'm sitting in the gardens of the Ashford estate, my estate now legally, though it still doesn't feel like mine, watching the sun set over Atlanta. Mama called this morning from Baton Rouge. The cancer is in remission. The doctors are calling it a miracle. She still doesn't know the real story of how I paid for her treatment. Maybe I'll tell her someday. Maybe some truths are better left as miracles. Keisha and Tamara sent pictures from their college campuses, both of them smiling wider than I've seen in years. That's real. That's worth whatever I had to become to make it happen. Vivian is inside, hosting a dinner for her real friends, the few people she trusts, the ones who knew about the plan from the beginning. She invited me, but I needed space, needed air, needed to figure out what comes next. I have the signed annulment papers in my pocket. All I have to do is file them, and I'm free, wealthy, unattached, able to start over as whoever I want to be. But I haven't filed them yet. Because here's what I learned in these strange months of performance and deception and unexpected connection. Sometimes the people who see you at your worst, who know exactly what you're capable of when you're desperate, who watch you compromise and struggle and still choose you anyway, sometimes those are the people worth holding on to. Vivian isn't the frail, dying woman I married, but she's also not the manipulative villain her family thinks she is. She's complicated, like all of us. She's lonely and scared and trying to control a world that keeps slipping through her fingers. I understand that. I've been there. Maybe I'm still there. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world, if you stayed with me through this whole messy confession, here's what I want you to know. There's no such thing as a clean choice when you're desperate. There's no version of this story where I emerge as a hero. I married for money. I lied to my mother. I performed love for an audience. Those things are true, and I'll carry them forever. But I also learned that sometimes survival requires compromise. Sometimes saving the people you love means becoming someone you don't recognize. Sometimes the line between right and wrong gets blurred by necessity, and you have to live in that gray space and make peace with it. I don't know if I'm staying with Vivienne. I don't know who Jericho Stone is supposed to be now that the performance is over. But I know this. I survived. My family survived. And whatever judgment comes from the choices I made, whatever consequences follow me for the rest of my life, at least I can look at my mother's face and know she's alive because I was willing to do what needed to be done. Maybe that makes me a villain in someone else's story. Maybe it makes me a fool. But in my story, in the only one that really matters to me, it makes me human. It makes me someone who faced an impossible choice and did the best he could with what he had. And if you've ever been there, if you've ever stood at that crossroads where all your options feel wrong, but you have to choose something, then you understand. You know that sometimes surviving means wearing masks. Sometimes it means playing roles. Sometimes it means becoming someone else until you figure out who you really are. The sun's going down now. Vivian's at the door, calling my name, asking if I want dinner. I've got annulment papers in my pocket and 42 million reasons to walk away. But I'm thinking about staying, not because of the money anymore, but because she's the only person in the world who knows exactly what I'm capable of when I'm desperate and chose to trust me anyway. Because somewhere in all the lies and performances and tests, we found something true. Because maybe the woman behind all those masks is someone worth knowing. Maybe we're both just people trying to survive in a world that makes you pay for every moment of peace. And maybe that's enough reason to stay. I'll figure it out tomorrow. Tonight, I'm just grateful to be alive, to have my family safe, to have survived a game I didn't know I was playing. That's all any of us can ask for, really. To survive, to protect the people we love, to find something real in the middle of all the performance. And if that's not a happy ending, it's at least an honest one. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever had to make an impossible choice. Tell me if you understand why I did what I did, or if you think I was wrong. Either way, I hope you got something from my confession, because this is my truth, messy, complicated, and human, just like all of us.